The main thing I teach my students is your mama can't save you. And so what do I mean? Each one of those boys, except for who's the one who Yusef, who ran for
Yusef
office and
Talon?
won.
Yeah.
Yeah. So except for him, his mama pulled him out. But everybody else had a grandmama, a mama, a sister, a daddy, and a mama sitting next to them while they gave this false confession. What does that tell you? It tells you that having a parent present is not who you should be asking for. You should be asking for a lawyer.
You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is. Only got no.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today on the journey towards self-mastery. Our next guest is a professor of law, entrepreneur, and a criminal defense attorney. She was voted Best Lawyer of 2021 from the Chicago Reader. She's been practicing law for over 22 years. She's the founder of Justice Junkie, which aims to teach and equip Black and Brown children with the tools they need to maneuver through the criminal justice system, the police, and other legal matters. She's also creator of the Trials and Triumph board game. This game helps young people learn how to deal with the police and avoid getting into legal trouble. She's also been a guest on various news networks and television programs discussing law. Let's welcome today Miss April Preyar to the program. Pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you
Ms.
very
April.
much for having me.
The pleasure's all mine, man. I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing, and I think it is much needed work. And a lot of things that you discuss and talk about, some of it actually was new to me. That learning about your work and some of the data that you've collected and what you've seen in your field and things like that are things I feel like we generally don't come into contact with until we are either faced with a criminal issue or know somebody that's dealing with a criminal issue. So I think the work you're doing is important.
Thank you. Yeah, my focus is prevention because I think so often we end up in these bad situations because we didn't prepare to avoid them. And just a little bit of preparation can completely change the game and save us from a lot of heartache.
Agreed. So I think, the information you're providing is just amazing. So I wanted to kind of get started with, your experience coming up. I know you grew up in Chicago, and generally, from an outside looking in kind of perspective, like when we look at the news and the information that gets sent out about Chicago, like it's violent, it's this, it's that. And, sometimes I wonder, like, is that really a case in which, how it gets promoted? So what was your experience growing up in Chicago? And do you think the narrative fits what the news has, the news and movies and media has promoted about Chicago?
So I grew up in the city on the far south side, about as far south as you can go and still be in the city, in a middle-class neighborhood that was filled with two-parent households. Everyone was married. Most of my parents' friends were teachers, as was my mother. My dad was a social worker. And so it was a little bit idyllic for us. It was really one of those neighborhoods where everybody looked out for everybody else's kid. Everybody's mama was going to get you in trouble, just like if your own mama had caught you doing something. And the great thing is a lot of us are still very close, and a lot of us have returned to the neighborhood. So that is another picture of the South Side that the media does not paint. So when you ask, is the news media accurate, I would say yes and no. So we don't even make, if you Google it, we don't even make the top 10 list for the most violent cities. We don't have the highest murder rate. We don't have the highest violent crime rate. It's all a narrative that gets perpetuated in the media. In part, I think a lot of it has to do with Obama connection to the city and people wanting to demonize him. So yes, is there shooting? Is there killing? Absolutely. But if you look at the numbers, the crime rate is actually on a downturn. It is has been, most recently, it was the lowest it had been in the last 40 years. And so, no, what gets perpetuated on TV and in movies about Chirac and the like is accurate when it comes to a certain group of neighborhoods and a small group of people. Like if you look really at the national average, it's a handful of knuckleheads out here hurting people. It just is. Across the United States, it's a very small percentage of people who are out here hurting each other. They are not all populated in Chicago. They are not all Black. and knowing what you see on the news is not completely accurate. Do we have violence? Absolutely. Do we have crime? Absolutely. Otherwise, I would have never had a job.
Good points. Good points. Thank you for clearing that up, by the way. When we think about Chirac, we're like, yo, this is murder capital of the world right here, like Chicago. So
I think even Little Rock is higher than us. Like
wow.
some of the places you would never think of are higher in terms. St. Louis, a lot of other places have a much higher violence rate. And, but we're a big city. We're a big city that had, bred the first Black president. And that is why we have a bullseye on our back.
Very, very interesting. So, I know you have a passion for Black people. So I'm like thinking about like what your upcoming was, and was that a part of your upbringing growing up, schooling and everything, high school, all that? Like, where did that come from, and what was your experience growing up?
It came from my mom. So I've been in predominantly white private schools my entire life. Never attended a public school, didn't go to a HBCU, been in predominantly white schools. I've always been one of a handful of Blacks. But my mom was a teacher who taught in one of the worst neighborhoods in Chicago, taught there for 40 years. And so she taught me what she taught her kids in terms of Black heroes, in terms of Black historical figures, in terms of Black authors, because what I got in my schools about Black history would fit into 2 paragraphs, 1 paragraph about slavery and 1 paragraph about MLK. And that was it. And so other than that, I would have not learned anything. Like, I remember going to her school. I was in 3rd grade. She taught 5th grade. I went to an assembly and everybody stood up to sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I was standing there like an alien. I had never heard the song. I did not know the words. Did not know why everybody in the room knew the words. And I remember asking my mom later, like, what was that song? Why does everybody know it? Why don't I know it? And then she took it upon herself to make sure I knew it, and to tell me the importance of it, and tell me about the Black flag, and to teach me all these things that I was never going to get in these, very prestigious schools, but they were never going to teach me about myself.
That's fascinating. What was your experience in the mostly white schools? Like, were you treated, right? And what was it like coming up in that space, like just by yourself?
There were always a handful of us, so I was never the only one. I think that made a difference. So we all tended to be very close, but we all have bad experiences. I remember in kindergarten, a white kid pushed me and said, "Why is your skin dirty?" And I went home and asked my mom, like, he said my skin was dirty. Like, my mom squirreled me for hours in the tub. What you mean my skin is dirty? And so I had those experiences, but overall, we were peers. And because we went from 1st grade, most of us from 1st grade through 8th grade together, we knew each other, we knew each other's families. And so a lot of that was removed, but the cool thing was there was always a celebration of who we were. We still had like international night, where my friend who was from Thailand and my friend who was from Taiwan and my friend who was from India could all bring their dishes, dress in their traditional dress, and we could talk about it. So there was that mix. So there was that multicultural aspect where I learned about a lot of different cultures. In high school, learned about a lot of different religions. But then there was colorblind. When I say colorblind, I mean oblivious, like oblivious macroaggressions.
Oh, I'm so glad you corrected that.
Macro, not micro. So I remember I would ride this train. And so everybody else from my community I went to a very prestigious high school. And so the first year I was the only Black person who rode this particular train line, and all my other peers were white. And I always sat by myself and I studied or I slept or whatever. And then this one white girl who was adopted, she just kept bugging the mess out of me to join her and her friends. So she was kind of outsider too, because everybody knew she was adopted. And so I was like, finally she wore me down. I was like, okay, girl, like I like her, but I ain't really fool with her friends. We all sat together. We're talking about, pop culture, and MC Hammer was popular at the time. So they decide to ask April, well, April, we know you can dance. Get up and dance like MC Hammer. I am absolutely mortified. So I just played dumb. I was like, I don't know how to dance. I don't know what you're talking about. Then they all start chanting, dance like MC Hammer. The girl who invited me gets it. She's bright red. She's embarrassed. And I never sat with those little heifers again, ever. So it's like you had experiences like that where today, even if I sat them down and told them, I'm not sure that they would understand what they did wrong. But like, was there violence? Were people mean to me? No. But were they absolutely clueless? And it was that cluelessness based in racism? Yes.
Ooh, man. I'm so glad you said macro aggressions, because when I hear the word micro, I'm like, who they micro to? Like, it when I experience it, it doesn't feel micro at all. Like, so it's like, that's powerful. So thank you for definitely clearing that out. Sorry you had to experience that. But I'm sure it taught you a lot, coming up. So what went into your decision to go to Duke?
My mom, like I said, my mom was the super educator. And so, not that my dad wasn't active because he was there, but she taught me from a very young age, like education was the route. Like it was expected of me to go to college. It wasn't an issue of, are you going to college? That wasn't even a conversation of which college are you going to? And so when I was in my junior year, she took it upon herself to take me on a tour, mostly up and down the East Coast. I don't know, we were gone probably a month. Driving up and down the East Coast, we went to Syracuse, we went to Howard, we went to Duke, we went to Cornell, we went to probably 20 different schools. And I visited all of them. And the only two that I liked were Cornell and Duke. And then when I heard that so many students at Cornell, they have a bunch of waterfalls, for if anybody's not familiar, a bunch of waterfalls, that every year a number of students jump off the waterfalls and commit suicide. I was done. I didn't want, I was like, that's not for me. That tells me the level of pressure here is ridiculous, and I didn't want that kind of life. And so at Duke, it seemed like they had a really strong Black community. It seemed like obviously there was academic rigor, but people weren't jumping off of waterfalls. And so I was like, okay, this is the place for me. And I really thrived at Duke. I was Black Student Alliance president. Before that, I was Black Student Alliance vice president. I started a nonprofit that today still continues called The Future Is Now, where we mentor girls from the community. So I had a fantastic time at Duke.
Man, also at Duke, you went to the Million Man March. Like, wow.
How'd you know that?
We this is MasterMine. We do our research. We study Black excellence, so we got to do our research.
I did. It was mostly an act of rebellion. So when Farrakhan made the announcement for women to stay away, me being a strong-willed, bullheaded Black woman, I was like, you're not going to tell me what to do. My daddy don't tell me what to do. You're not my daddy. You're not going to tell me what to do. So I took some strong-willed Black women with me. A couple of them lived in D.C., so we were able to crash on her couch for free. We had some Black male friends from high school who flew in they went to Iowa. And it was about 10 of us who rolled up. So about half guys, half girls. And it wasn't until I got to the mall that I realized I wasn't supposed to be there. But at the same time, because it was a sacred moment. It was a sacred moment to see all these Black men standing in peace and brotherhood, helping one another, whether they knew each other or not, encouraging one another. And then that's when I realized, oh, this is their space. I'm not supposed to be here. But I was still glad that I got to witness it with my own eyes, not on TV, not by some secondhand or third-hand account. And oddly enough, it caused another very difficult situation for me, probably my most difficult academic situation I had at Duke with a Jewish professor. So I was so excited when I came back from the march. I was in a essay writing class. And so each week we would write an essay, or half the class would write an essay. You would pass your essay around, and it was a small group. So everybody would comment, and then the teacher would comment last. And so I wrote mine, and I'm all excited about this beautiful display of Black men. And I'm describing what I saw, and I described what I just said to you. I realized I shouldn't have been there, but I was glad that I was. And so I wrote all this down. I'm very excited. And then the following week, everybody was supposed to review my essay. And so, they're talking about, okay, you can move this paragraph here. You can get rid of this sentence, those types of remarks. This teacher ripped me a new one for 45 minutes. It was so bad that a white boy jumped up, threw his hands out and said, enough, leave her alone. And it wasn't until he did that she snapped out of it. She was so offended by who threw the event that she could not see the beauty of what took place. And so it became when it came to, that was my major, English, like I got all A's in English. And so this lady trying to give me like a D on this paper. So I had to I wrote her a response and I ripped her a new one. And I think the first line was, even the devil can recite scripture. And then I talked about, it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. Because she was talking about there weren't 1 million Black men there. There weren't as many people as they say. I did the math. I calculated how many buses there were, how big the mall was. And so, but it led to this whole attack. And she still did not stop her attack until, while we were meeting, another colleague came in who ran the English department, who loved me. I had been in 2 of her classes. And she's like, April. And so when she got the validation from another white woman, that's when she decided to change my grade.
Ooh, man. Yep. We could do a whole program about your experience with racism. Like, this is wow. That is fascinating. I've had some interesting experiences like that as well. Like when another white person has to validate you to be like, she's okay. She's good. You know, like,
Yeah. She's a good one. She's one of the good
ones. Man. That is such a unique experience though, because generally, we've had a few people on the program that have experienced the Million Man March and have talked about it, but not a woman. So I'm fascinated that you went, and I'm curious to know like what the impact was for you at that moment and into now, like just having experienced something like that.
Well, it just showed me the power of solidarity and collaboration, because probably one of the most striking things was the men in the crowd were from different parts of the country, but they were also from different religions. It's not like it was all of Farrakhan's followers in the crowd. He was probably like, the Nation of Islam was probably the minority in the crowd. And so to still be able to come together, to lock arms, to say, well, these are the changes that we need to see. And that he also demanded, and this was interesting with the group I was with, demanded that people be sober, to not drink or to smoke weed while they were there. And so like, I think it was for the whole weekend. It was like a weekend of atonement. So even men who were not Muslim adhered to that, because that was a whole conversation with our group, because none of them were Muslim, and they were all still like, well, man, I'm not going to drink out of respect, out of reverence for this sacred moment. On the flip side, it's very disappointing that so little came out of that powerful moment. People talked about forming groups and people talked about going back to do massive change in their neighborhoods, but I don't know if there are measurable outcomes that you can track back to that specific event, because as far as I know, there was no follow-up after people left the event.
Fascinating. But there was follow-up from April Preyar, of course.
Yeah, ripping taking my teacher's head off, sure.
Yeah. And you know what? That probably was the start of your law career right there, battling your professor. So other than that, like what kind of inspired going forward your pursuit of law and your interest in law, and why criminal law?
So initially I wasn't interested in law. I was a senior in law school without a plan. I mean, a senior in college without a plan. I was an English and Spanish major, and I didn't know what I was going to do with that. So I went to law school because I figured it was a good place to use my strengths, public speaking and writing, and figure things out. I honestly didn't realize it came with a $200,000 price tag. Just call me ignorant. I just didn't get it. And so I went to law school not really clear about what I wanted to do. But that first year, a upperclassman, I think she was a second year, she worked at the public defender's office. I didn't know what a public defender was. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what a prosecutor was. I was very naive and green when it came to that. And she was like, hey, I bet I can get you an internship. Bet, give me an internship. I need something for my resume. Hey, they interviewed me on the phone. I answered all of the questions based on my gut. They hired me on the spot. And so I worked there all 3 years as an intern for a felony trial attorney. A big part of my job was going to the jail to interview his clients when he didn't have time. And I loved it. And as scary as it was walking into a jail and getting searched and all of that stuff, when I sat down, the guys were super respectful. They were grateful. They were happy that somebody was there because most of them, their families had dropped them, cut them off, stopped writing, stopped coming to see them, weren't paying for anything. And so they saw me as somebody who could get a message to their lawyer. So they took the time very seriously. There was no like trying to flirt with me or being disrespectful to me. They were like, nah, I bet. Okay, you tell the lawyer I said this and this and this, ask him what he says about that and that and that. And I just realized this was a really powerful way to stand in the gap for people who oftentimes had nobody else in their corner. And so when I graduated law school, that was the only thing I wanted to do. I wanted to be a public defender.
Fascinating. So you start doing this work. Did you start off with a firm or your own?
No, neither. I started off as a public defender. And so they were not hiring. Well, in DC, they did not hire people straight out of law school. They wanted attorneys with experience. So that X'd me out there. I applied, but they weren't hiring anybody who was a recent law grad. In Chicago, I live in Cook County, they were not hiring because they had a hiring freeze. And so I came home and didn't have a job. So I worked as a legal secretary for a while for this very old man. He was like 99 years old. And I did such an excellent job. He wanted to keep me forever. But I got my bar results. I passed the first time. And then after that, I started working for a friend. I had worked at a law firm all through college and all through law school. And then the firm folded right before I graduated. But one of the partners who I had worked directly for, who was about, maybe 9 years older than me, we had gotten to be friends. He branched off on his own, and I was his only employee. We had no secretary, no paralegal. It was just me and him against the world. And I worked for him for about 4 months, and then the public defender's office hired me.
Okay. So you're busting your butt, man. Like you passed the bar exam, now you're working at the public defender's office and everything. And, after all this work, you're still dealing with same old racism. So you go into court and, defending people and things like that. And they think you a baby mama. They think you lost out here. So walk us through that like experience and just how you've been able to maneuver through that.
Well, first, it's an important note to say when I graduated from law school and I took the bar that last month, I cut my hair. It was about 1 inch longer than yours. And so before that, it had always been straight and long until my shoulders. And then I'm rocking. It wasn't quite a fade. I had, about 1 inch of curls. And so not only that, I'm walking into the public defender's office like that. This was a time natural hair was not acceptable. It was not, nobody else was doing it. I didn't know anybody else with natural hair. And so I'm walking into a courtroom and everybody's kind of giving me a side eye. So I'm like, I'm black. Like the skin ain't going nowhere. Like you see these features. So what difference does it matter if my hair is 1 inch long? But that added to it. So I'm in spaces where, yes, most of my colleagues look like Becky and most of the people I'm representing look like me. And I loved it. I loved it. And the first thing I had to counter was because I was only 25, is that when grandma came to court, she like, this little girl can't represent you. She don't know what she's doing. And I'm like, puppy breaks, grandma, I got this. And then it was like when they would see me do anything, a motion hearing, just, argue some issue that came up, they would be so blown away that grandma would pull me to the side. It was inevitable. Baby, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud. I had mamas and grandmamas. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And so I absolutely loved fighting for the underdog. I really enjoyed what I did for about 6 years. And then actually I left again because of racism. Because even in this office where we're defending probably 90%, 80% Black folks, I was passed up for promotion by a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl. And I was incensed. And everyone's like, oh, just wait, you're going to get the promotion. I was like, I don't care. And I did. I got the promotion 6 months later. But I was like, I shouldn't have had to wait 6 months longer than somebody who was less senior than me, who had less trial experience than me, just because. And she was pretty. She was pretty. And that was part of the equation. And I'm just like, nah, it shouldn't work like that in this office where we pride ourselves on representing Black people. Like that's really a factor when we're giving out promotions. And so I just made my decision. I was quitting in 6 months. People who know me know I make decisions very quickly, change them very slowly. So once I put my foot down, I'm going to figure out how to make it work. I can fall on my face 10 times, but I'm going to figure it out. And so that's what I did. And I never went back. And then oddly enough, I have a contract with the Public Defender's Office now. So 24 years later, I am building out their entire curriculum they're building a defense center in a neighborhood on the South Side where I lived for 20 years. And so now I'm in partnership with them, but I don't work for anybody.
That is beautiful, man. That is beautiful. So speaking of not working for anybody, obviously you have to choose who it is that you are going to represent. As far as who you represent in court and things like that, do you have like specific requirements? Like, are there people that you're going to be like, there's no way? Or do you just take on anybody?
So I am actually phasing out my practice. I am focusing on the preventative work I do, the educational work I do, the speaking, the media. So right now I'm not taking any clients. So you would have to, I don't even know what the requirements would be for me to say yes now. But when I was practicing and I had a robust practice, I would not take sex cases. It's just a personal thing. I didn't care if you did it or if you didn't do it. I wasn't gonna represent you. I would gladly pass you along to somebody else. It just gave me the ick factor. And I knew I couldn't effectively represent somebody if I feel like I got slime on my skin when I'm talking to you. So I just didn't I did a couple when I was at the PD's office. And that was part of my reason for leaving too, because I had gotten to the level where they were like, oh no, well, for this promotion, you have to be able to take these really serious cases. And I said, well, how do I opt out of all sex cases? And they were like, you can't really do that. And I was like, I absolutely can when I work for myself. So I don't do sex cases. And some time ago, I had stopped doing murders just because murders are really expensive. And most people, black, white, whatever you are, can't afford them. They're usually $25,000 and up. And so the people who would call me who had murders didn't have the means. And oftentimes, even though people have a very bad view of public defenders, I'm helping them change that stigma. That's part of the reason we're partnering up. But even though people have a very bad stigma or a very bad view of public defenders, because it's a governmental agency, have greater resources when it comes to a serious case like that. So they have multiple investigators at their disposal. They have multiple experts at their disposal. Whereas somebody like me, so the last case I did actually was a death case. It wasn't a murder. It was a reckless homicide. Somebody killed somebody while driving. The family had to pay out of pocket about $30,000 for the two experts that we hired, plus pay $35,000 for the kids' bond. And so, but most families don't have those means. And so it just got to the point where it wasn't even a matter of, will I take a murder or not? It's like this family can't afford all that a murder entails. And so it's probably going to be better for them to go with the public defender's office.
It's interesting too that you mentioned murders and the other things, because a lot of times, like, when you're looking at movies with lawyers and they're representing like a mass murderer or, anybody like that, it's like you think about like, how do they maneuver through good, bad, good person, bad person, justice, whatever. So did those emotional things play in your head with like some of your clientele in the past? Like, or were you able to just keep it strictly business, professional? There's no emotion connected to this. I'm going to do my job.
No, there's always emotion, because for the most part, especially if my clients were Black, I always saw them as my little cousin, my brother. I always saw them as some extension of me. And so there was always that, and I could never just leave what I did at work. I always took it home. I've only met one person in my entire career who I think had no soul. Everybody else, I really felt like, even if they did it, that there was redemption available to them, that they could be reformed, that they could be, and I had a colleague of mine, white girl, who said very early on, she didn't know I was listening. She was saying to somebody else about me. She said, nobody builds rapport with clients faster than April. That's the greatest compliment of my life, because I always saw like I could build instant rapport because I didn't see myself as better than you. I didn't see myself as, I just saw, but for the grace of God, there go I. I always saw like if I had made one bad decision, that could be me. And so that's how I treated people. So no, I never had to wrangle with, say, evil, like staring back at evil. I always look for people's humanity. And a lot of times, I'll look at somebody and be like, they look like my cousin. We look like we could be related. They remind me of a childhood friend. Or it would be somebody who was a friend's child or my cousin's, family member on the other side of the family. And so there was always that connectivity. So I never got to the point where I was like, oh, this person is bad or evil, even if they did something very bad. Normally there was a long explanation behind why. Very rarely do I find people just committing crimes for kicks. A lot of times it's survival, or they thought that their actions were justified on the street, but didn't realize they weren't justified in court. So it's like, oh, he disrespected me. He disrespected my girl. He disrespected my mama. He came at my cousin. So of course I went after him, not realizing there's no defense for that in a court of law. And so a lot of times I just spent a lot of time educating people. And that's why I got really excited about educating people outside the courtroom. Well, let's do this outside the courtroom so they don't ever need to meet me in this setting.
So with that said, was there a moment in time or an experience with a client where you were like, yo, I have to do this preventative work. I can't be doing it after the fact or when they're with me right now? Like, was there a case moment, or how'd that come about?
No, that was pretty much a constant. But what I realized, there's only so much you can do with talking, because I think the statistic is you only remember about 10% of what somebody says to you. And so I would have these conversations with especially these young boys, tell them, okay, this is what you did wrong. This is what you should have done differently. Even if they remember everything I said about their situation, we all know that there are 24 other situations that they could walk into 5 minutes after leaving my office. And we didn't cover that. We didn't have time to cover all of those. So that's the nice thing about the work I do now, is that they get to see multiple situations and scenarios, like in my board game, in a very short time frame. And then they're like, oh, bet. Now I know what to do. Oh, man, that's where I messed up. Oh, that's why my cousin's in jail now. And so it just makes it so much easier than me sitting there wagging my finger at somebody being like, hey, baby, don't do this next time.
So before we get into your board game, I saw these stats on your website and I was curious. So you said 1 in 3 Black boys will be arrested by their 18th birthday. So I was like, whoa. And then half Black males will be, or 49% of Black males will be arrested at some point in their life. So first off, where are those statistics from? Because the average person that's never heard of this is like, what in the world? Like what? Like 1 in 3, like 49%. What is this?
So yeah, I got them all. I rattle these off quite often. And Black folks are 5 times more likely than white folks to be arrested. So those particulars, you're the second person to ask me today about those stats. So those come from the Journal of Crime and Delinquency. It's a 2014 study. It was also featured in USA Today and a bunch of other publications that broke down the numbers. So the actual thing is, I converted it to 1 in 3. The actual stat is 33% of Black men will be arrested, not just stopped, arrested by their 23rd birthday. And then this 49% of Black males will be arrested by their 18th birthday. And the authors are Bram and Bushway.
Thank you for that. So I actually been like talking since I learned about that stat. I was talking to a few of my friends and just asking, Black males that I know, I'm like, about their childhood a little bit. And if there's things that they think they would have probably gotten arrested for if they would have gotten caught. And almost all of them are like, yeah, there's things I did, including, myself, like there's things, that I got lucky with that, could have landed, in any direction. So that those numbers are very, very, interesting. But what do you find, like, when dealing with court, like, that a lot of these Black males are getting in trouble for?
Now it's guns. So it has shifted. So 24 years ago when I started practicing, it was drugs. It was crack, mostly. crack was the drug of choice, and then marijuana, because at the time, possession of marijuana was illegal in Illinois. So fast forward where you got dispensaries in all the risky neighborhoods. So people aren't getting busted for possession of marijuana unless it's in a large amount, and then they think you're a dealer and you're competing with the dispensary, so they're definitely coming after you. But the majority are gun cases. So I live in Chicago, Illinois. Illinois was the 50th state to allow people to carry weapons outside of their homes. So for the longest, you could only have a rifle, not a handgun, unless you're a police officer, of course. And you could only use it in your house or your place of abode. And so now when we have concealed carry, the only thing that changed is police officers are now treating these lawful gun holders as though they were gangbangers. And so most of the cases that most of the calls I get are from legal gun owners who were carrying wrong and are now facing felonies. So we have 2 gun licenses here. One still to carry in your home, to defend your home, or to take to your place of business. But if you're in between those 2 places with this 1 gun license, your gun is supposed to be broken down. Ammo is supposed to be separate from the firearm. Now, you already know most people ain't following all these rules. And so those people who get stopped, they are out here like it's the Wild West with it either on their hip, in their lap, under the seat, between the console, in the console, whatever. They are getting stopped for something minor like blowing a stoplight. And then the cops are hitting the lottery because they're finding a weapon. And guess what? They treat you just like you are a gangbanger who never owned the gun legally. So those are the majority of calls I'm getting. So it's all guns. It's just because there is gun violence, because we are in the news, just like we started off with. We are in the news all the time. People are paranoid and they think everybody on the corner is going to shoot them. So now the cops treat legal gun owners who look like you and me, at least, as though we never had a gun license. And now they are facing felony charges. And people don't get that. They're like, well, they're quick to tell you, hey, I have this particular license. Yes, boo-boo, but you can only have it in your house. Oh, well, I took the class and I'm waiting for it to come in the mail. Well, waiting for it to come in the mail means it's not in your hand and you're facing a felony. And people do not get that.
Man, that is interesting. So I just want to pan the camera for a bit. And, I'm looking at these stats for Black males. Like, do you know by any chance the stats for white males? Like what it is, or just
I don't remember off the top of my head, but surprisingly, it wasn't that far behind. For white males, I think once it was 49% for Black men, it was something like 40% or 39% for white men to also be arrested. Who it's much lower for is women. I think we're like they couldn't do it for the 23-year-old group, only the 18-year-old group, because the women stopped reporting. But it's about 11% to 13%. But of course, Black girls and actually indigenous girls get locked up more. We're more likely to be incarcerated than other girls.
Not surprising. So you've mentioned that juvenile defendants under the age of 18 are 3 times more likely to be falsely confess to crimes. So when I looked at that stat, the minute I looked at it, I'm thinking Central Park 5, right? I know that incident had a lot of things that you probably looked at and were like, all right, that should have been done. They shouldn't have said that. Parents should have done that. Like, so with looking at that, I know a lot of people are familiar with it from the Ava DuVernay's documentary, When They See Us, and all of that. So when looking at that incident, what do you see that were like some like red flags and things that the kids shouldn't have done, the parents shouldn't have done, and that should have been dealt with better?
It's funny that you mentioned that. So I actually use that in the curriculum that I have that I go into schools, but I don't use the fictionalized version When They See Us. Although she did a phenomenal job with that, I use the actual footage from their confessions. You can find it on PBS. And so I got an account on PBS. I downloaded it, whatever, and I played that because I want them to see little boys who look like them, the same age as them, and say, oh, wow, that could easily be me. So I got to throw this out before I answer that question. So this is where Chicago does hold the record We are actually the false confession capital of the world. We have held the record, at least for the last 5 years, of having the most wrongful convictions that were later exonerated. In fact, in the city of Chicago, we have more than 50% of those in the entire nation. So anyway, so yes, I talk about that. And the main thing I teach my students is your mama can't save you. And so what do I mean? Each one of those boys, except for who's the one who, Yusef, who ran for office and won? Yeah. So except for him, his mama pulled him out. But everybody else had a grandmama, a mama, a sister, a daddy, and a mama sitting next to them while they gave this false confession. What does that tell you? It tells you that having a parent present is not who you should be asking for. You should be asking for a lawyer. So none of them probably had the wherewithal, had the know-how, had any of that, but they should have asked for a lawyer. And what asking for a lawyer does is it stops the interrogation. So I tell my students that when a lawyer comes to a police station to represent you, we serve 3 purposes. One, obviously, we're going to go in and tell you what your rights, tell you how the process works, and tell you to shut up. Number 2, we're going to tell the police officer that you ain't got nothing to say. And number 3, we're going to serve as your witness. So in case you are beat, you are tortured, as again, Chicago holds a record on that. In case you are tortured by police, you are beat up by police, you are harmed in some way, or simply they say that you blurted out a confession an hour after I leave, well, guess what? That's a problem because this kid lawyered up. And any confession that they later make, whether they actually said it or the cops made it up, gets thrown out in court.
That is interesting. So don't call my mom, call my lawyer. Interesting. Yeah.
All because right, every state just about has a requirement where the cop has to notify your parent, but each state has a different requirement about how fast they have to do it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of states are going to say within a reasonable time frame. Reasonable is in the cop's head, not in the kid's head. Kid is going to be like, call my mama right now. Cop's going to be like, okay, well, we'll get to that after I get your confession. We book you, we fingerprint you, and we take you on down to juvenile hall. Then I'll call your mama.
So you have a list of like do's and don'ts when dealing with the police. So would you mind like sharing that with us?
No. So they're all R's. So the first 4 are don'ts. Don't run, don't reach, don't resist, don't run your mouth. Then the next 3 are do's. Request a lawyer, refuse consent to search, and refuse all DUI tests. And that's what gets reiterated throughout my game. That's what gets reiterated throughout my curriculum. The kids leave being able to rattle those off.
I would ask why, right? Because if I know that I didn't drink anything, police stopped me and they're like, "Can you take a DUI? Can you take a breathalyzer?" I'm like, "Sure, why not? Like, I ain't why not? Like, I ain't do nothing. I'm sober. Why would I refuse it?"
Well, because those are 2 different things. Before they ask you to take a breathalyzer, first they're going to ask you to stand on one leg and hold your leg up parallel to the ground for 30 seconds with your arms at your side. Next, they're going to ask you to walk a straight line 9 steps, do a turn, and walk 9 steps back, heel to toe. Then they're going to ask you to take a pen. They're going to have a pen, and they're going to ask you to follow their pen with your eyes. Well, guess what? You've never taken any of these tests before. And even if you are a supreme Olympic athlete, you're going to flunk. Why? Because they're subjective, because the police officer knows what he's looking for. You don't. You've heard the instructions once. We all are terrible listeners. And you're going to step off of the imaginary line, or you're not going to step heel to toe. I've literally had cops in court be like, he didn't step heel to toe. There was a half an inch between his feet on the 3rd step. They're going to say that you turned incorrectly, you pivoted, and they told you to take small steps. You wobbled. You lifted your hands up to support yourself, and you're not supposed to lift your hands up. All of those are indicia of being drunk. So you lose a game that you don't know how to play. As for the breathalyzer test, who's to say that it has been calibrated correctly, and who's to say that the machine is functioning correctly? So in your head, you're like, no, I didn't have anything to drink. Well, did you have Listerine in your mouth within the last 30 minutes? Did you have something else that might identify as alcohol? Are you a diabetic? Diabetics can actually emit a smell from their bodies and also produce, I believe, something in their mouths that mimics alcohol and can get a positive reading. So do you know, are you the scientist or the technician that created the device? Why would you trust any device that a police officer who you don't know is sticking in your mouth? So I say take no DUI test. Now in every state, your license will be suspended. So you're like, well, why would I take no test if my license is going to be suspended? Because you have a better shot at beating the underlying criminal case, which could make you lose your job, make you lose your housing, make you lose your family. So why risk it? Say no, make the cop work for his $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 paycheck and make him prove your case. Now all he can say is, well, I suspected she was drunk. She smelled like alcohol. They're not observing you walk. They're not observing you talk. They don't have any definitive scientific evidence saying that you were under the influence of drugs and or alcohol. And so now you've got a shot to win. And a lot of states also give you the opportunity to challenge the suspension. My state does, gives you the ability to challenge the suspension based on all the things I said. And a lot of these judges will be like, nah, you didn't show me enough. That wasn't enough for me to believe that he or she was drunk. I'm going to give them their license back and then we can go to trial.
Man, you just blew my mind because 99.9% of 9, I'm taking the breath a lot. But I'm not drunk, man. Get out of here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, wow.
How about this? I don't drink at all. I don't drink or smoke, and I still wouldn't take a breathalyzer. Why? Because I don't trust the cop. I don't trust the device. I don't trust anything that has to do with that. I don't trust your so-called science that backs it up, because every few years you'll see something quietly hit the news. Oh, this breathalyzer, the breathalyzer, it always has that izer on the end of it. The toxalyzer 10-10-5-5000 is defective, and these 500 people were all charged with DUI who hadn't had a sip to drink. And I'm like, no, you ain't gonna get me. It's not gonna be me. You have to prove it. You're not gonna get my blood. You're not gonna get my urine. You're gonna have to prove it in court that you believe that I was under the influence of anything. NyQuil, marijuana, liquor, whatever it is, prove it all.
So you're kind of making me think about a childhood experience right now. So I think when I was about 15 to 16, me and my cousins were leaving our house to go into my cousin's car, and we were about to go hang out. And literally when my cousin's opening up the door, police officers stop him, and they start yelling at us. And this is right in front of my house. And they tell us to sit down on the pavement. So I'm sitting down on the pavement in front of my house. Another police car comes. By like in the next 5 minutes, I got like 6-7 police cars in front of my house. They're flashing lights in my cousin's car. They ask him to search the car. So we don't know any rules right now. My cousin's about 17, 18, and they ask him to search the car. They got the flashlights on there. They search all through the car, search the trunk, search everything. And we didn't know what was going on. They didn't find anything. And I'm like curious at this age right now. I'm like, what's going on? The police sergeant comes and he dismisses everybody. And that was going to be it. So I'm like, I talked to the police sergeant. I'm like, excuse me, sir, like, did we do something wrong? What happened? And he was like, well, there was a shooting and robbery a few blocks down, and you guys fit the description. And I was like, what was the description? And he just looked at me and walked away. And now you're saying that, I'm like, how should have that been handled? Because they could have found whatever, like.
Yeah, so you fit the description. This is something else I talk about. So I actually do an exercise where I have kids stand up. I say, I'm going to yell out a descriptor. If it fits you, stand up. If the next descriptor fits you too, continue standing. If not, sit down. So I'll say black, everybody stands up. Male, the girls sit down. I'll be like 15 to 25. Everybody stays standing. I'll be like between 5'5" and 6'2", everybody stays standing. Then I'll be like black hoodie, and still I'll have about half the boys standing. I'll be like, you fit the description. And they'll be like, what? I'm like, those are the descriptions cops get over the radio. It's not like Criminal Minds or the SUV show. they don't get a video, even if a video exists. They don't get a picture, even if a picture exists. They get a quick call saying, stop anybody in the vicinity who looks like this. And the number one descriptor is black male. And they usually don't have facial hair. That's not part of the description. Complexion oftentimes isn't part of the description. Hair may not be part of the description. Height, and if the height is there, it's going to be broad, 5'7" to 6'2". The age is going to be 15 to 25. So what they're going to do is the great roundup. They're going to round up everybody in the area. And so all they're saying is they got a call about some black boys or some black men who had robbed somebody. So they stopping every black man they see in the vicinity.
That is interesting. So we shouldn't have said anything. And
no, you should have said, I do not consent.
I do not consent. Okay, I got it.
I do not consent does not stop the search, though. What it does is it helps you on the back end. If you get arrested, it helps me fight your case in court. Because oftentimes what happens is police officers are stopping you. I don't know, Chicago and New York, same thing, stop and frisk. Whether it's legal or illegal, they still going to do it. Hey, kid, come here. They pat you down. They're looking for something. You say, I do not consent. First of all, they're like, oh, this kid knows something. And might know somebody. It's better than I know my rights. No, don't say I know my rights. Say I do not consent. And then when they do that search anyway, guess who they got to explain to now in court? The judge. I had a 15-year-old kid, same thing. A kid, come here, pass him down. They find a gun. He says nothing. They take him. I end up taking him, representing him in court. And in court, the kid wasn't in the hot seat. The cop was. Because the kid was very articulate. He was like, I was walking down the street. Walking down the alley. I didn't do anything wrong. I complied with the police officer. I was polite. No, I shouldn't have had a weapon. But they didn't receive a call saying he had done anything wrong. The gun wasn't visible. And so the cop starts tap dancing about how it is you start digging in this kid's waistband and you haven't been called to stop him for any reason. And that's why we won. Because he could not articulate what it was that drew his attention to this kid, why he stopped him, why he patted him down, and why he conducted this illegal search. So simply saying, I do not consent, or saying nothing, my preference is I do not consent, because then if you don't say anything, the cop will be like, well, he didn't object. He told me I could search him. He handed me his book bag. He invited me into his house for tea. You have to say, I do not consent.
Wow. Thank you for that one. So I'm thinking about another childhood experience. So my grandmother lived a few blocks from my house, and I would walk to my grandmother's house and she would cook, and then she would give me like aluminum plates with food to bring back to my mom and, for us or whatever. So I'd walk over to bring it back. And on 2 occasions, police officers stopped me. And I was probably like 11 years old, 12 years old. They stopped me and they asked me for ID. And I have ID on me. I was 11, 12 years old. And then they were like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's food. Like, I'm like, it's, I'm bringing food home. Can you open it? So I had to unpackage all the food, take everything out and open it, and for him to observe and look at it. And he was like, all right, thank you. And he's like, you're free to go. And that was that. So that happened a couple of times. Was I able to say no, like, and just say, I don't want to open it, or I don't consent to this? Or
you always don't ever just say no, because no has no power. You say, I do not consent. And then you say, I want a lawyer, which has a lot of power, because what that tells the cop immediately is this kid knows something. He actually knows his rights. And that means an adult in his life taught him his rights, and we should fear the adult who taught him his rights. So you're going to say, I do not consent. So I'll tell you my childhood experience. So I was about 13. I was in a program during the summer. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I was in a math and science program. I was in a bunch of math and science programs. This one was on a college campus. I went with a bunch of my friends, and it was far from our house. So we all rode the train together, about 80 blocks. And so these dummies find out that there are tunnels underneath the school. And of course, they want to explore the tunnels. I want to explore the tunnels too, but I'm the goody and I'm not about to get in trouble. So can we just get on this train and go home? So they're all like, no, we're going to explore the tunnels. I'm not fearless. I'm not going to get on the train by myself and ride 80 blocks. So I was like, okay, I'll go with these nuts. And so we go into the tunnels. They start running around like banshees. they find a big pile of mail. And I don't know how I knew playing with the mail was a federal offense. So they start jumping up and down and throwing the mail in the air. And I'm just like, please stop. Can we just go? Before I can get the words out, I hear police. I mean, multiple police, probably about 6 police officers. So they don't even have enough handcuffs for us because there were about 9 of us. So they just marched us in a single file line to their police station. And I'm just like, my mama is going to kill me. So we get in there, we all sit down, and there's one boy the same age as me. And, they're all like, who are you? What's your name? Do you have same thing? Do you have ID? Where do you live? We don't have ID because we're like 12 and 13. He jumps up. He says, nobody say a word. We all want a lawyer. I didn't know what he was talking about, but his mom was a lawyer. She had taught him this. And so I'm just kind of looking at him like, and I'm the talkative one. So he keeps looking like, don't try it. We sat there for 3 hours. No one said their name. I noticed because we were 3 hours late getting home, but no one said their name. No one had an ID. No one said, they didn't know where we came from. They didn't know that we were in this program. They didn't know who we belonged to. They didn't know what part of the city we were from because we were all from different parts of the city. And so after 3 hours, they let us go. And so I learned in that moment the power of silence. Just shut up. We didn't, shut up and then lawyer up. And that's what my shirt says. Shut up and lawyer up. And so I learned from that and didn't even really click until I became a lawyer that I realized how powerful that moment was and how he had really protected all of us. I don't know what kind of trouble we would have gotten into, but we got into no trouble because there was no arrest because everybody was released. And it works the same for adults. 9 times out of 10, if somebody calls me because a cop is looking for them or a detective has been to the house a couple times or God forbid they're already in custody and the parents trying to get me to the police station, 10 times out of 10, the cop is pissed when I walk in the door. They hate seeing me come. And then when I get there, 9 times out of 10, my client walks out right after I walk out because they were waiting for you to fall on the sword. They were waiting for you to tell on yourself. They usually are quite lazy and don't really have much evidence. So they're like, well, if we get this dumb kid in here, he'll tell us everything we want to know. Come tell your side of the story. That's what they'll say. Come tell your side of the story. And you gladly want to show how you were justified, street justification, not court justification. And then you talk yourself into an arrest. And so the minute I get there and I shut that down, they usually don't have enough to move forward with the case. And my client ends up leaving right after I leave.
Man, that is fascinating. So I could see somebody listening to this and be like, yo, April, this sounds great. It sounds amazing. But I'm a parent and I know you're familiar with American Skin. And, the conversations that Black parents have been having since these police shootings with their children. And in American Skin, Nate Parker plays a father whose son was murdered by the police. And prior to that happening, he had a conversation, that talk with his son. And his son is excited because he's in a new school. He's learning the law. And he's like, well, I could defend myself with this and I don't have to do this and this and that and the third. I can record the police, blah, blah, blah. And then he just stops him and tells the son to listen and his friend to listen and saying like, listen, the rules that apply for them don't apply for us. And what my main mission is for you to come home, do whatever they say, and we can handle everything after the fact. So, my like it kind of goes a little bit against what you're saying in my view, and it's like, where is this balance? Because you don't know what kind of police officer you're getting when you're dealing with them. So where is that balance? In the movie too, his son ends up being killed because he was recording the police. So where's the balance in how to deal with these things? Because a lot of parents are afraid, if my kid does end up being smart with the police and I'm a lawyer up and I don't got to say nothing, like, what if he gets killed? What if the police harm my kid?
So if you notice, my 7 rules didn't say you have a right to pull out your cell phone and start recording in the cop's face. And so my problem with that scene was cop told him to put the phone down. Daddy told him to put the phone down. Cop told him to put the phone down. Dad, at some point, your common sense and critical thinking has to come in and be like, man, this is a bad move. Whether I'm justified in my actions or not, wow, I could really get hurt doing this. And so another thing I teach is leave the damn cell phone alone. We have countless cases where the police have justified them shooting somebody to death by saying, "Oh man, I saw a black object and I thought that black object was a weapon." Remember, one of my rules is do not reach, and that includes reaching for your cell phone, because when you start moving around, a cop, you know in your head, "Oh, I'm reaching into my book bag because that's where my phone is. I'm reaching into my waistband because that's where my phone. I'm reaching into my pocket." He's not psychic. She's not psychic. She doesn't. Half these cops have very little training. Depending on where you live, they have no training. Literally, this training is not required all across the United States, and they have no de-escalation training. So if they see you moving and they told your ass to stop moving, guess what? They're going to aim. They're going to make sure they make it home. So why is it that we don't do the same thing? Why is it that we don't make sure that we make it home? How is flashing your camera phone in somebody's face helping you make it home? You got to do whatever it takes to survive that encounter, but that does not mean doing everything the cop says. So if you notice, I said I have a distinction that I teach: comply versus consent. Comply, you're going to comply with any physical action the police officer is asking you to take that has to do with his safety or your safety. If he tells you to put your hands up, that's because he wants to see you don't have a gun, a knife, a syringe, a razor blade, a broken bottle to hurt him with. If he tells you to get out the car, same thing. He's trying to see your hands. If he tells your passenger, who had nothing to do with this interaction, to get out the car, it's because he wants to see his hands, because he's outnumbered, because there are 4 of y'all and 1 of him, right? If he tells you sit on the curb, if he tells you get up against the car, it's all about seeing your hands to make sure you don't have access to weapons or you're not able to hide drugs or something illegal from him. But that's it. If he starts asking you to consent to anything, whether it's a breathalyzer test, it is DUI test, it is to a search of your pockets, your book bag, your trunk, your glove box, your purse, the list goes on and on, your answer is I do not consent. There's a difference. Comply and consent are not the same thing. But again, I still said nothing about pulling out a cell phone and putting it in the cop's face. They're going to say that's obstruction. They're going to say they gave you a lawful order to stop the obstruction and you didn't, and that's how you ended up wounded or killed. Being contrary is not part of this. Showing how smart you are is not part of this. Making it home is the bottom line, and this is how you do it.
Thank you for that. Life-saving information. Thank you for that. So I want to talk about, Justice Junkies and the work that you're doing with that, because now you mentioned that you're transitioning into the preventative measures, and that is what you're doing. So can you talk about Justice Junkies and the work that you're doing with that? And then, obviously you're saying just us, just this. So I'm a little bit curious as well too of what your thoughts are about justice, especially being an attorney. What do you define justice to be, and what is your view on justice as it relates to Black people?
So that's how I came up with the name Justice Junkie. There's a quote that says, "There is no justice, there's just us." They're not sure who originated the quote, but it was very popular during the civil rights movement. So there is no justice, there's just us. And so what I wanted to do was flip that on its head and bring justice to just us. Part of the reason that we get stomped like ants in the justice system is because we don't know the system. We don't know the fancy legal jargon. We don't know, even if it's our case and we're standing at the bench and all these words are hurling over our head and it's about us, we don't even know what happened because we can't translate. And so my goal was to serve as a translator, because that's how they keep us at arm's length. They're using these fancy terms that they know we don't know, and our lives are at stake. And it doesn't matter if you're in child support court, if you're in eviction court, it doesn't matter what kind of course you're in. It's about your life, your livelihood, and your liberty. And all of a sudden, you don't even know what the hell just happened because all these words were dancing over your head. And so I wanted to take that away, take away the power from the system and return it to the people. And so that's how it all started. I started doing videos on Facebook, breaking down the law in like 2-minute or less videos. And the third video I did got 1.2 million views overnight. And it was just the first 4 things I just told you. Don't run, don't reach, don't resist, don't run your mouth. I broke down each one. I stood in front of the main courthouse here in Chicago, and it went nuts. I think it's up to like 2.6 million views now. And so after that, when I started doing weekly videos on Facebook, I was like, okay, that's great. I'm reaching my peers, but I'm not reaching my peers in their 40s and late 30s and early 50s aren't out here hitting people in the head. They aren't out here robbing folks. So if I need to get to the kids who are more likely to commit crimes as groups, because we all gonna make a bad decision together, then I need to get into a different realm. And I was like, where are most kids during the day for 5 hours a day? School. So I created a board game to be taken into schools, nonprofits, after school programs. And at the time, just because it's a good idea doesn't mean it's actually a good idea. So I didn't know if it actually would be fun. So I did a prototype first, and I tested it on 300 mostly Black and brown, some white kids here in Chicago, in Chicagoland area, from 13 to 18. After each kid played for 25 minutes, they surveyed it. And then I implemented every single thing they said in their survey into the final product. And what I found right away is that kids, once they started playing, didn't want to stop. They loved the stories. I have 54 real life scenarios. They learned from the stories. They literally said, oh, okay, man, this is what I did last night. Oh, man, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble. Or this is what I did last week, and that's why I got in trouble. So they got a better understanding so much faster because they were able to learn through stories. They were learning through experiences. But guess what? There was no trauma involved in the experience. It wasn't under pressure. There was no angst. There was no panic. And so then I started hearing back from kids who had played the game saying they ended up in one of these situations and they knew exactly what to do. So they would come back to me with their chest all puffed out, proud, like, Miss April, I did what the game said. And they'll be like, I didn't get arrested. The cop didn't, but didn't put me in handcuffs. I didn't get smart with the cop and I got released. And I'm like, see, I'm onto something. And so that's where I got really excited about sharing the game. And now it's been all over the country. And I'm running Facebook ads right now, so it's really all over the country. I get orders almost every day from California, from Maryland, from Texas. And people ask me all the time, well, is it just based on Illinois law? Is it only for Illinois? I'm like, no, it's universal because it's based on the 4th and 5th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So all of the actions, even if it's called grand larceny in New York and it's called felony theft in Chicago, guess what? The actions are the same that lead to getting arrested. So if the kids, because oftentimes kids don't even know which actions are illegal. They'll be like, man, I didn't know that was illegal. I got into a 20-minute conversation with a 19-year-old about why he can't have a 15-year-old girlfriend. He didn't know that was illegal.
Wait. We gotta touch on that. What did you tell him? Please tell us what you told him. Please.
So nothing in the game is graphic because I didn't want it to be traumatic. So there's no murder in the game. And the sex cases are you meet a girl on an app, you're going back and forth, she sends you pictures, you think she's, 28. You find out she's 14, right? So there's no, nothing explicit. And so then we can have a conversation about it. So that particular one, he was with the girl, they're messing around in the house, mom walks in, mom goes ballistic. He's confused, like, we've been together for a year, and mom has him arrested. And he's like, what am I getting arrested for? You find out your boo was 14. And so the guy pulls this card, and he's like, well, like, what did I do wrong? I'm 19. What you mean I can't have a 14-year-old girlfriend? And his boys are like, bro. And I'm just telling him, I'm explaining to him that, he said, well, what if she told me she was 18? What if I thought she was 18? I said, you're the adult, she's the child, so the burden is on you as the adult. The burden is on you as the adult to know that she's not a child, to verify that she's not a child. I said, as ridiculous as it sounds, it's on you. So whether that is you getting her ID, whether that is you asking 10 of her friends, or whether you leave her alone altogether and say it's not worth figuring it out, the burden is on you, and you will be the one who is charged with a sex crime and made to register as a sex offender for the rest of your days. But he didn't know that. And he was just like, and I get it. Like, if you're 18 and your girlfriend is 16 and everybody's cheering because you're taking her on prom, but then mom gets mad because of how you treated her daughter and mom goes to the police. Well, mom was cool for a year, but now mom ain't cool. And now you looking at real charges because you cannot lawfully be sleeping with her.
Now, like that is difficult. I've spoken to kids about this, like teenage, like that is a difficult concept to understand. Like, I go to high school with this girl, I'm a senior, she's in 10th grade, she's mature. Like, what do you mean? Like, why cannot this not happen? Like, I don't get it. Like, they feel like this is not right. Like, and the girls are like, I'm mature. Like, I can make my own decisions, kind of thing. Like, why can't I date him? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're in the same school.
Sometimes they're in the same grade because she might have skipped a grade and he might be in his regular grade, and they have classes together. She's in AP classes, but what I see more often than that is little kids. And I'm going to say like 12-year-olds taking pictures of themselves and sending it to a classmate they like. And that classmate shares it with the whole class. Or they put it in AirDrop, or they put it in Discord. And now you got 10 little kids all in possession of child porn.
Wow.
And that's the one I've been asked to talk about. Like, I did an event for the alphas here, and they specifically asked me, hey, put that on your agenda. Make a pin in that one to make sure you cover that topic because it's that rampant.
Man, I'm at a loss for words.
And they're coming after these kids. I had a client as young as 6 who
the
police, police and family services were. So that's 2 separate investigations: police investigation, family services investigation. They both after this kid for sharing pictures of body parts and sharing it with another kid in the class. Now, clearly, you 6, you don't even know what you're doing. But they were going to charge that kid. Had I not jumped in like lawyer, stop calling this family. She wanted to make an arrest, come through me, and they left the child alone.
Wow, you messing up my brain right now, because it's like, at what age are we supposed to have these conversations with the kids about, like, is this messing up their childhood, talking to them about these things? Like, what age do we have these conversations? And how, just your opinion, what age do we talk about this stuff?
I'm going to say you start having conversations at 6 or 7, and they can be mild conversations. They don't have to, I'm not saying sit down and play my game at 6 because it's for 13 and up. But I remember this older white woman, and she said that she had a biracial 4-year-old child. And I guess she was the primary caregiver. She was like, I'm buying your game and I will dumb the cards down. I'll figure it out. She says, but I would rather do that than not have the conversation. She was like, we'll just gradually have the conversation as the baby gets older and older. But she's like, I'm not waiting until 16 to start talking about this stuff. Because like I said, I've had clients who got arrested at 4, 6. There's a 6-year-old in Texas. She changed the law. It's a video. Her name is Kaya. I think I'm saying it right. Kaya Rowe. The law is named after her. And that's because she had a temper tantrum, as 6-year-olds do. She had a temper tantrum at school. And the principal, she got taken to the principal's office. And when she got to the principal's office, there was an officer there. And the principal was like joking, like, oh, baby, you got to go with him. She's like, the kid is like, no. She has a full blown, she's like, no, I'll be better. I'll do better. It's all on video. And she's so small that his handcuffs don't fit on her. So he zip ties her like a hostage. Get this, gets better. Does not take her to the police station, takes her to juvenile hall.
What?
Yeah, the girl is still traumatized. I think she's like 9 now. She's still traumatized. She has social anxiety. She's got PTSD. And because of that, they changed the law in Florida to make a minimum age for arrest. But get this, it's 7 instead of 6.
Oh my goodness, man. Like, what in the world?
Most states have no minimum. I think like it's over half of the states have no minimum age of arrest.
Are you serious? Wow. That's wow.
So I say talk to the babies early, even if it's a very watered down version of it, and then you just talk. If you get pulled over for a traffic ticket, you have a conversation about, what to do if you get stopped by a police officer. You start having conversations. If you go to the principal's office and you see somebody in a blue uniform, you say, I want a lawyer.
Wow.
Seriously, you tell them I want a lawyer, not call my mommy. I want a lawyer.
Oh, man, this is life-saving information. And like, I didn't know. I didn't even know. Wow. This is wild. So like, where do you see, Just Us Junkies? Where do you see things going? Like, where would you like them to go?
Yeah. So I want my board game, Trials and Triumph, to become a household name in Black and Brown communities. I want every household to have it, just like they have a chess set, a checker set, or a Monopoly game. And so the website is the only game you need. And I want people to not just buy it and sit it on the shelf, but play it. And because the thing is, the game is magical. I was talking about this yesterday. The game is magical because everybody thinks kids, oh, I had several people, oh, my family's entirely digital. Like, first of all, you say, I think that's tragic because that means you're not even having conversations with your kid because their face is always on a phone. But kids are looking for different things to do. And so when you present to them, especially you break up the norm. Like, I walk into a classroom and they see me with a game. They like, bet, we ain't got to do social studies anymore. Yes, they are welcome to playing it. And so in your household, it's very similar. This is something they've never done before and they want to explore it. And so usually you have to twist their arm to make them to play. I'm going to be honest. You got to twist their arm. But then once they start, they don't want to stop. Why? Because they want to see what the next story says. There are 54 cards. They want to see what the next story says. They want to beat their cousins or friends or siblings to the end. And as they play the game, they see, man, one person gets arrested, you lose all the gains you made because the game has two worlds. The world of possibilities where you graduate high school, you go to college, you buy a duplex, you buy a dog. Ups and downs of life, and along the way, there are flashing lights. That's police contact. You draw a card, and maybe the flashing lights contact is your tail light is out and the cop gives you a pass. Or maybe your car matches the description for one that was used in a robbery, just like you said. You don't know. And so if you land in the world of trouble, that's because you got arrested. And now you're stuck in court, going round and round, waiting for your case to be resolved. But what kids get immediately is, well, while I'm stuck over here, I'm missing out on life that my friends are living over here. They're going to Paris. They're going to grad school. They're getting married. They're buying a house. And I'm over here going round and round waiting for the judge to get it together. And so it's very powerful. And that wasn't even something I anticipated, is the fear of loss. They really fear, oh my God, I lost all of this. What else will I miss out on while I'm stuck and my friends are living their best lives?
Man. Yo, so what's crazy is we spoke before through email, and I'm like, excuse me, I'm like, send me your stuff and everything. So I go through the email, and I get the game, and I'm like, man, like I was expecting like $19.99. I see $59.99. I'm like, I don't know if I got that right now.
39,
Like
39.
Oh, 39, excuse me.
39.
99. And I'm like, I could get this another time. Like, I was going to get it and play with my daughter and have that conversation during the interview. But the price tag, I'm like, but now like having this conversation with you, like you just sold me completely. Like I'm getting the game, like for sure. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I see the value. So.
And the thing is, kids, and people don't get this, kids can literally play once and leave with tools for the next 40 years of their life. Like literally, they can play. Obviously, it's better they play more often, but they can play one time and get it and be like, okay, bet. If nothing else, they remember the first four things, because most kids, the number two rules that they mess up, most kids are inclined to take off running if a cop stops them. I don't care if they're in a car. I don't care if they're on foot walking down the street. They are like, okay, I can outrun this fat cop. And every time I do a role play, we do a traffic stop, and almost always a kid jumps out of the fake car and takes off running in the classroom because they just are over it. They don't want to deal with it. Their flight response is on 10 and they out of there. And they don't realize that you're not going to outrun this cop's radio and one of his buddies is going to catch you. So they're inclined to run, and then they certainly are inclined to run their mouths, and that's what does the most damage. That literally can sign you up for a 45-year prison sentence for something you had nothing to do with. Because remember, I told you cops get very little information on the radio. They are quickly piecing together a puzzle, so anything you tell them, I was just coming from school. Oh, baby, well, your school is 2 blocks away from this burglary. You just placed yourself at the scene of the crime. Oh, I was the passenger in the car. I wasn't even the driver. Oh, guess what? We think that the shooter in the drive-by shooting was the passenger, not the driver. Come with me. They hand you a piece of paper. You sign with your left hand. Oh, bet we think the shooter was left-handed. There is nothing you can say that's going to benefit you when you're talking to a police officer. Nothing.
This, what you just mentioned, just kind of like, I show my students the story of Benji. It was a 30 for 30 ESPN episode, and Benji Wilson, Chicago star athlete, was murdered by another teenager in Chicago. And Billy Moore happened to have a friend with him, Omar Dixon. Omar Dixon was chilling, just standing there. You know what I'm saying? Didn't even know this whole thing was even going to go down. Didn't do anything, nothing, just in there, and he ended up getting 30 years.
Yeah, that's how group crimes work. That's a big part of what I teach in the game is the doctrine of accountability. Because what's his name? What Omar did not do, he didn't help the victim. He didn't report it to the cops. He probably kept associating with the shooter afterwards. Those three things make him accountable. He's accountable not only for being present, he's accountable for all of the shooter's actions.
Wow.
And so imagine, that's how kids get caught up in group crimes. They're like I was when those cops came after us, too scared to leave because I wasn't going to go home by myself, too scared to stay. So I'm like, okay, I'll do the lesser of the two evils. I'll stay with these dummies, and ended up caught up. Now imagine if one of my friends had a weapon on them or shot somebody or robbed somebody. I'd be charged for all of their actions, even if I didn't know they had a weapon before I got there, even if we had not planned it in advance. Everybody thinks it's like Ocean's 11, where you sit down for 6 months and you got a map and you got a bomb guy and we all gonna wear black and we're gonna shimmy from the ceiling. No, in order to be implicated in a group crime, oftentimes all you have to do is be present, plus do nothing afterwards. You go out to pizza with these people, you're texting back and forth. You do not disengage from the group. You do not tell the authorities. You do not help the person who was injured or robbed. You're on the hook too.
Wow. Life-saving information. Oh my goodness. Before we close out, I just want to do a quick speed round. Activity called What's Your Favorite? So we'll do it real quick before we close out. So you could keep it short and simple, because you've elaborated with us so much today. So I appreciate your time. I want to know what your favorite law movie or show is, and what you think is most realistic. Because I speak to a lot of lawyers, and they don't like anything that's on. Like, what do you think is most realistic?
I liked my favorite law show is Criminal Minds, but that really has nothing to do with law. That's more crime. My favorite law show was How to Get Away with Murder. The plot was clearly far-fetched, but what she taught in class was almost always spot on. Anything she said about the actual courtroom was almost always, yep, that's it, she got it. But the storyline was out of there.
Interesting. All right. Favorite law book?
I generally don't read law books, so I couldn't tell you that one. You mean like fiction novels about law?
Or nonfiction, or,
No, I can't think of anything.
All right. Okay. Favorite law?
My favorite law. Well, my favorite law probably now would be the fact that marijuana possession is legal in Illinois, because that freed a lot of people who were just users and not dealers. And now, I mean, I don't smoke, but I'm glad that it's no longer criminalized here.
That makes sense. Favorite case you ever had?
That's so hard. I'll just say my most recent one, the reckless homicide, because it's a very fascinating case. My client he was charged with aggravated DUI, but he actually had a very rare, well, it's not that rare. He had a very unusual condition. He was working in the heat for 3 days and basically was on the verge of heat stroke. He had delirium as a result of dehydration, severe dehydration. That made him jump out, and he saw hallucinations.
Wow.
They tasered him and he didn't feel it. It's really an interesting story, and I got to do a lot in terms of experts, and we won. And so that's what made the difference. I won the DUI, which was the hardest charge, which was he was facing 14 years in prison, and I saved him from that. So that's my favorite recent case.
Man, that's powerful. That's powerful. Favorite life gem that anybody has given you?
Oh, well, this is what my dad always says. I always leave a man with his dignity.
Something to think about right there. All right. Man, I'm just so excited that I've got a chance to talk to you today. Looking into legacy and what you're building, what is it that you want to be remembered for? What do you want people to know and understand about the work that you did?
To know that I'm on a quest to completely do away with false confessions anywhere in the United States, and to completely do away with police shootings of unarmed people. And that's what I want to be known for. And I want that work to continue on after I'm gone, that somebody else will take up the mantle to completely bring it. Because really, for the first one, for false confessions, there's no reason we should ever have any confession of any kind. Nobody should ever talk to police, ever. Unless it's your cousin at the barbecue, you should have nothing to say to a police officer, ever.
Shut up, lawyer up.
Shut up, lawyer up.
That's fast. That I see it, and I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing. For those that are curious about reaching out to you, maybe do things with their schools, or just for information, or about your the work that you're doing, or the game, where can they find you? Where can they reach out?
So the best place they can go to, well, they can hit me up on Facebook. I'm Justice Junkie everywhere. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, JUSTUSJUNKIE. It's the same @ whatever the rest is, at all those places. But they can reach out at justicejunkie.com/contact us, and they can direct message me there. And they can also learn about the game and learn about the curriculum at justicejunkie.com.
Appreciate that. And before we leave out, can you leave us with your favorite quote and what it means to you?
Oh, the one that I started with, there is no justice, there's just us. Because Black people have been victimized by, excluded by, taken advantage of by the justice system, and the injustice system, I should say. And it's time for that to change. And so I always hang on to that quote because I want to change the paradigm. I think that's what I was sent here to do, is that I am a paradigm shifter, and this is the paradigm I plan to shift.
Powerful. I feel like you just made me a better parent and a better teacher. Like, cause I'm this information is in, there's no price tag to it, man. So I appreciate you just being open. And, a lot of times when people are selling things, like they'll leave out information. They'll be like, well, I can't tell you all of this. Like, I'll give you a little piece, but you gave us quite a bit of information today. And I'm sure anybody listening in to the program will be taking notes and definitely get your game and, and find out more, because this is information that we don't get like that we don't even know
I
about.
mean, I can't afford to hold anything back because it's us that's at stake. And so it's like, so what if the person listening, forgets to get the game, but 10 minutes from now they get stopped by police, or they get a phone call that the person they love the most in the world is in the police station? At least, the very least they know, tell that person to shut up and then get on the horn and try to find a lawyer. But I can't hold that back. I can't wait for somebody to pay $39.99 to get the information, because maybe they will, maybe they won't. But this is why we get harmed by police like we do, because we don't know, and we don't know how powerful we are and how to fight back.
So I'm gonna run an experiment. I'm gonna pay the $39.99. I'm gonna play with my kids. I'm gonna play with my students, and we're gonna be back for a part 2. We're gonna be back for part 2. For sure. Man, April, I am a fan. I am appreciative of your work. And I'm glad that people like you exist in the world. And I know you're doing things to make our situation better. So I appreciate you. Listeners, support the work that April is doing. Get the game. Find out about what she's doing. If you in a school, get her to come over, teach the kids, anything. So support her work. We got to support people in our community that are fighting for us and doing right by us. Because we support everybody else. So why not support us? So I appreciate the work you're doing, April, and we will definitely have you back.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. And listeners, remember, your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. If you can think it, you can do it. If you believe in it, you can be it. And if you fight for it, you can have it. The world is yours. This has been your host, Mr. G, and I will see you next time on Mastermind.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one's starved illegal. All you had to do